The rope burn on Katherine Walsh's wrist still stung as she pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of the sheriff's office, watching two men nail her face to the bulletin board outside. She had maybe 3 minutes before they turned around and spotted her standing there in the alley, wanted for a murder she had witnessed but did not commit. And the October wind of 1882 carried their voices straight to where she hid. $500 reward for Katherine Walsh, wanted for the murder of Benjamin Crowley. One deputy read aloud to the gathering crowd in Ardmore, Oklahoma. Says here she shot him in cold blood over a land dispute. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs because Benjamin Crowley had been her employer, the kind old rancher who had given her work as his bookkeeper when she had arrived in town 6 months ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need to start over. She had found him bleeding out in his study 3 nights ago, had cradled his head in her lap while he used his last breaths to whisper a name she could barely hear. Then his nephew had burst through the door with the sheriff, both men taking one look at her blood-soaked dress and the gun on the floor beside her, and that had been that. She had managed to slip her bonds in the cell last night when the young deputy had tied them poorly, climbed out through the window bars that someone had sawed through years ago and never properly replaced. And now she was running out of time and places to hide in a town that had already convicted her in their hearts. The crowd dispersed, and Katherine knew she needed to move, needed to find a horse or a hiding place or anything that would buy her more time. She slipped deeper into the alley, her split skirt catching on a nail as she squeezed between 2 buildings, and that was when she collided hard with a solid wall of muscle and leather. Strong hands caught her shoulders before she could fall, and Katherine found herself staring up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath a dusty brown hat. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark blonde hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a gun belt slung low on his hips, and a silver star pinned to his vest that made Katherine's blood run cold. "Easy there," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "You hurt." Katherine tried to jerk away, but his grip was firm without being painful, and she realized with dawning horror that he was studying her face with an intensity that meant recognition was coming any second now. She had to run, had to fight, had to do something other than stand there like a fool waiting to be arrested again. "Please," she whispered, hating how her voice shook. "Please, I did not do it." His eyes narrowed, and she saw the exact moment he placed her face with the poster, saw his jaw tighten and his whole body go still in that way dangerous men did before they struck. But he did not reach for his gun or call out for help. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at the street behind them, then back at her with an expression she could not read. "You are Katherine Walsh," he said, and it was not a question. "I did not kill him." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I found him dying, and he tried to tell me who did it, but I could not hear, and then Marcus came in with the sheriff, and they assumed, and I know how it looks, but I swear on my life I did not do it. Marcus Crowley, Benjamin's nephew. Yes." Hope flared in her chest because he was asking questions instead of hauling her back to that cell. He is the one who stood to inherit everything. He is the one who had reason to want Benjamin dead. The man was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face like he was looking for the truth written there. Katherine had no idea what he saw, but something in his expression shifted. Some decision made that she could not name, but could feel in the way his hands gentled on her shoulders. "I am Warren Fletcher," he said finally. "U.S. Marshal, passing through on other business, and either you are the best liar I have ever met or you are telling the truth, and I have a reputation for reading people pretty well. You believe me?" Katherine could barely get the words out past the tightness in her throat. "I believe you deserve a chance to prove your innocence before they hang you." Warren glanced at the street again, then made a decision. "My horse is tied up behind the livery. Can you ride?" "Yes, but where are we going?" "Somewhere safe while I do some digging." He released her shoulders but caught her hand instead, his calloused palm rough against hers as he tugged her deeper into the maze of alleys. "Stay close and stay quiet. If anyone stops us, you are my prisoner and I am taking you to Fort Smith for federal trial. Understand?" Katherine nodded because she understood that this stranger was offering her something precious and rare, something she had no right to expect but desperately needed. Trust. Or at least the benefit of the doubt, which in her current situation amounted to the same thing. They moved through the back ways of Ardmore like shadows, Warren seeming to know exactly which routes would keep them hidden from prying eyes. Katherine's heart did not stop its frantic racing until they reached the livery, and she saw his horse, a massive bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a patient demeanor. Warren swung up into the saddle first, then reached down and hauled Katherine up behind him with a strength that made it look effortless. "Hold on," was all the warning she got before he urged the horse into a canter that quickly became a gallop once they cleared the town limits. Katherine wrapped her arms around Warren's waist and held on for dear life, her cheek pressed against the warm leather of his duster, as Oklahoma grassland blurred past on both sides. She had no idea where they were going or why this man had chosen to help her, but she knew with absolute certainty that he had just saved her life, at least temporarily. They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, the afternoon sun sliding toward the horizon and painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Finally, Warren slowed the horse to a walk and guided them off the main trail onto a narrow path that wound up into rocky hills Katherine had never explored. The landscape grew more rugged, dotted with scrub oak and red soil, and then they rounded a bend and she saw it. A cabin, small but solid, tucked into a natural hollow in the hillside like it had grown there. It had a stone chimney and shuttered windows, and a lean-to stable that looked recently built. Warren dismounted and helped Katherine down, his hand spanning her waist, and she was suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how his eyes seemed even bluer in the fading light. "This is my place," Warren said, stepping back and breaking whatever spell had momentarily held them. "I bought the land last year, built the cabin myself. Nobody knows about it except my brother, and he is 3 states away. You will be safe here." Katherine looked around at the isolated cabin, at the gathering dusk and the empty landscape, and felt tears prick her eyes because this man was trusting her with the location of his private sanctuary, based on nothing but instinct and a 2-minute conversation in an alley. She did not deserve this kindness, did not know how to repay it. "Why are you helping me?" The question came out rough with unshed tears. "You do not know me. For all you know, I really did kill him." Warren was quiet as he led his horse to the lean-to and began unsaddling it, his movements practiced and efficient. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. 3 years ago, I arrested a man for robbery based on witness testimony and physical evidence. Everything pointed to him being guilty. He hanged 2 weeks later, and a month after that, the real robber confessed on his deathbed. The man I arrested had a wife and 2 little girls, and they lost everything because I was too sure I was right to look deeper. He set the saddle over a rail and turned to face her, his expression shadowed but his eyes bright. "So now I look deeper, and when I look at you, I do not see a killer. I see someone terrified and alone who is telling the truth. Maybe I am wrong, but I do not think so." Katherine had to look away because the faith in his voice was almost too much to bear. What if you cannot find proof? What if there is nothing to find? Then we will cross that bridge when we come to it. Warren moved past her toward the cabin, fishing a key from his pocket. Right now, you need food and rest, and I need to think about where to start looking. Come on. The cabin interior was sparse but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, a bed in one corner and a desk in another. Warren lit a lantern and set about building a fire while Katherine stood awkwardly by the door, unsure what to do with herself. Her whole body ached with exhaustion, and her wrists throbbed where the ropes had bitten into them. But more than anything, she felt unmoored, like the world had tilted sideways, and she was still trying to find her balance. "Sit down before you fall down," Warren said without looking up from the fire he was coaxing to life. "There is water in the pitcher and bread in the chest. Help yourself." Katherine did as she was told because her legs were trembling and her head felt light. She poured water into a tin cup and drank it down, then cut a thick slice of bread that she ate mechanically, barely tasting it. Warren got the fire going and then rummaged in his saddlebags, producing a small pot and some dried beef that he set to boiling over the flames. "Tell me everything," Warren said as he worked. "Start from the beginning. How did you come to work for Benjamin Crowley?" So Katherine told him. She explained how she had fled St. Louis after her father died and left her with nothing but debts, how she had made her way west looking for a fresh start, how Benjamin had hired her to manage his books when his eyesight started failing. She described the old man's kindness, his love of the land and his animals, his frustration with his nephew Marcus, who had shown up 6 months ago claiming he wanted to help run the ranch, but mostly seemed interested in when he would inherit. "Marcus gambles," Katherine said, accepting the bowl of stew Warren handed her. "I saw the debts in the ledgers before Benjamin asked me to stop recording them. Thousands of dollars lost in poker games and horse races. Benjamin was getting ready to cut him out of the will entirely. He told me so 2 weeks ago." Warren's expression sharpened. "Did Marcus know about that?" "I think so. They had a terrible fight that night and Marcus stormed out threatening to make Benjamin sorry. But Benjamin was a stubborn old man and he just laughed it off." Katherine's voice caught because she had liked Benjamin, had been grateful to him, and he had died afraid and alone except for her useless presence. 3 days later, I was working late in the study going over the books when I heard a gunshot. I ran to Benjamin's room and found him on the floor with blood everywhere. The gun was right there and I was so stupid, I picked it up without thinking because I did not know what else to do. And that was when Marcus and the sheriff arrived," Warren finished. "Marcus said he had heard a shot and come running. The sheriff was with him because they had been having drinks together in town. They both saw me standing there with the gun and Benjamin's blood all over my dress." Katherine set down the bowl because her hands were shaking too hard to hold it. "I tried to explain, but nobody would listen. They arrested me right there, and I have been in that cell ever since, until last night when I managed to get free." Warren was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire with his brow furrowed in thought. If Marcus did this, he was smart about it. Having the sheriff with him when he discovered the body makes him look innocent. But if he is desperate enough for his inheritance to commit murder, he might have made mistakes, left evidence behind. How will you find it? You cannot just walk into the ranch and start investigating. Marcus will know something is wrong. I am a federal marshal investigating a fugitive. I have every right to ask questions and look around. Warren's eyes met hers across the fire, and Katherine felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the determination she saw there. "I will figure this out, Katherine, I promise you that." She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him because the alternative was unthinkable. "Thank you. I know I have said it already, but I do not know how else to express what this means to me. You are risking everything to help me. Maybe." Warren stood and moved to the door, checking the darkened landscape outside before closing and barring it. "But I think you are worth the risk. Now get some rest. You can take the bed and I will sleep in my bedroll by the fire." Katherine started to protest, but Warren held up a hand, his expression brooking no argument. "You have had a rough few days and you are safe here. Let yourself rest." She was too tired to argue, and the bed looked impossibly inviting after 2 nights on a cell floor and a day running for her life. Katherine lay down fully clothed, pulling a blanket over herself, and watched Warren settle by the fire with his bedroll and his gun within easy reach. The last thing she saw before exhaustion pulled her under was his profile silhouetted against the flames, strong and steady and solid, and she felt safer than she had in days. Katherine woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, pale morning light filtering through the shuttered windows. For one disoriented moment she forgot where she was, then memory came flooding back and she sat up to find Warren already dressed and cooking breakfast over the fire. "Morning," he said, glancing over at her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a while." Katherine pushed her tangled hair out of her face, suddenly aware of how she must look after days of imprisonment and flight. "What time is it?" "A bit past dawn. I am going to head into town soon and start asking questions. You will stay here and keep the door barred. Do not open it for anyone but me, and if someone besides me finds this place, there is a back trail through those rocks that leads down to a creek. Follow the creek north for about a mile and you will hit the road to Marietta. You can disappear from there." The casual way he laid out an escape plan made Katherine's stomach twist with anxiety. "You think someone might come? I think it pays to be prepared." Warren handed her a plate of food and a cup of coffee. "Eat. I need to head out soon, but I want to make sure you have supplies before I go." They ate in companionable silence, and then Warren showed her where he kept food stores, ammunition, and a spare rifle. He made her practice barring and unbarring the door, showed her the back trail he had mentioned, and went over the plan twice more until Katherine could recite it back to him. His thoroughness was both comforting and terrifying, a reminder that the danger she was in was very real. "I should be back by nightfall," Warren said as he saddled his horse. "If I am not back by dawn tomorrow, something went wrong and you need to run. Do not wait for me. Warren." Katherine caught his arm before he could mount up, her hand small against the corded muscle beneath his sleeve. "Be careful. Marcus is dangerous, and if he suspects you know something, he might try to hurt you too." Something flickered in Warren's eyes, something warm and protective that made Katherine's breath catch. "I will be careful. You just stay safe, all right." She nodded because she could not trust her voice, and then Warren swung into the saddle and rode away, leaving Katherine alone in the hidden cabin with nothing to do but wait and worry. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Katherine tried to keep herself occupied, tidying the cabin and mending a tear in her skirt and pacing the floor until she wore a path in the dust. She kept the rifle close and jumped at every sound, her nerves stretched taut as wire. By the time the sun started sinking toward the horizon, she was nearly sick with anxiety, her mind spinning through all the terrible things that could have happened to Warren in town. Full dark fell and Katherine lit the lantern with shaking hands, then stood by the window and stared out at the empty landscape, willing a familiar silhouette to appear. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Katherine told herself that Warren had said not to worry until dawn, that he might have simply been delayed, but the cold knot of fear in her stomach only grew tighter. She was dozing in a chair by the dying fire when the sound of hoofbeats jerked her awake, her heart slamming against her ribs. Katherine grabbed the rifle and moved to the window, peering out into the darkness until she saw a single rider approaching. Even in the dim moonlight, she recognized the set of his shoulders and the way he sat his horse, and relief flooded through her so intensely it was almost painful. Katherine had the door unbarred before Warren even dismounted, and when he stepped into the cabin, she had to physically restrain herself from throwing her arms around him. He looked exhausted, dust-covered and grim, and there was a cut on his cheekbone that had bled and dried. What happened? Katherine demanded, helping him shrug out of his duster. Are you all right? I was so worried when you did not come back before dark. I am fine. Just took longer than I expected. Warren sank into a chair and accepted the cup of water Katherine pressed into his hands, drinking it down in long gulps. But I found something. Actually, I found several things, and none of them look good for Marcus Crowley. Katherine pulled up a chair across from him, leaning forward eagerly. Tell me everything. Warren set down the cup and met her eyes, his expression serious. I started by talking to people in town, asking questions about Benjamin and Marcus under the guise of tracking you down. The picture that emerged was not pretty. Marcus has debts all over town, including $5,000 owed to a man named Pike who runs an illegal gambling operation out of the back room at the saloon. Pike is not the kind of man you want to owe money to. $5,000, Katherine breathed. Benjamin was not worth that much. Even if Marcus inherited the ranch, he would barely cover his debts. That is what I thought too, so I did some more digging. Turns out Benjamin had a life insurance policy taken out last year for $10,000, with Marcus as the sole beneficiary. I talked to the insurance agent who sold it to him, and he said Benjamin was reluctant, but Marcus convinced him it was prudent. So Marcus knew he would get $10,000 if Benjamin died. Katherine's hands clenched into fists in her lap. That is motive, but is it enough to prove he did it? Not by itself, but I am not done. I went out to the ranch this afternoon, told Marcus I needed to look around as part of my investigation into your whereabouts. He was nervous, kept trying to hurry me along, but I took my time. I found the room where Benjamin was killed and it had been cleaned recently. Too clean, like someone scrubbed away evidence. Warren leaned forward, his eyes intense. But they missed something. There was a boot print in the back hallway, pressed into some dried blood that had run under the door. I measured it and then I made an excuse to get a look at Marcus's boots. They matched Katherine. Size and tread pattern identical. Hope blazed in Katherine's chest so bright it hurt. That proves he was there. It proves he stepped in Benjamin's blood, which he will claim happened when he arrived and found the body. But here is the interesting part. The blood in the hallway was dry enough to hold a boot print, which means it had been there for at least an hour before Marcus supposedly discovered the body. And the print was heading away from the room, not toward it, like someone fleeing the scene. Katherine tried to follow the logic. So Marcus killed Benjamin, stepped in the blood as he left, and then came back later with the sheriff to discover the body and frame me. That is my theory. But I needed more, so I went to the sheriff and asked to see the evidence from the crime scene. The gun that was found near Benjamin's body was yours, right? Your father's old cavalry revolver that you brought with you from St. Louis. Yes. I kept it in my room at the ranch for protection. How did you know that? Because I asked around and people told me you had it. But here is the thing. When I examined that gun tonight, it had been fired recently, but it had not been cleaned properly. There were powder burns and residue that a careful shooter would have wiped away. You were a bookkeeper, Katherine. You have delicate hands and an eye for detail. If you had shot someone, would you have just dropped a dirty gun at the scene? No, Katherine said slowly. I would have cleaned it first out of habit if nothing else. My father taught me to always clean a gun after firing it. Exactly. But someone in a hurry, someone who grabbed your gun and used it in a moment of rage or desperation, might not think about that, might just fire it and drop it and run. Warren's jaw tightened. I think Marcus went to your room, stole your gun, shot his uncle, and then panicked. He went back to town to establish an alibi with the sheriff, then returned to the ranch and made sure you were the one who found the body first. You played right into his hands by picking up the gun. The pieces were falling into place, but Catherine's legal mind, trained by years of keeping meticulous books and records, saw the holes in their case. It is a good theory and the evidence supports it, but will it be enough to convince a judge? Everything you found is circumstantial. The boot print could be explained away. The dirty gun could be a mistake I made in panic. Without a witness or a confession, I am not sure we can prove this. Warren was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently touching the cut on his cheek. Finally, he said, "There might be a witness. When I was leaving the saloon tonight after talking to Pike's men, someone followed me out. A young woman who works there, name of Sarah. She said she has information about Marcus, but she is scared to talk because Pike owns her debt and she cannot afford to make enemies." "What kind of information?" "She would not say, but she agreed to meet me tomorrow night at an old barn about 2 miles north of town. Said she would tell me everything then, but I had to come alone and I had to make sure nobody followed me." Warren's eyes met Catherine's and she saw the concern there. It could be a trap. "Marcus might have figured out I am onto him and sent this woman to lure me into an ambush." "Then you cannot go," Katherine said immediately. "It is too dangerous. If she really does have information that can clear your name, I have to go. This might be our only shot at getting the proof we need." "Not if it gets you killed." Katherine reached across the space between them and grabbed his hand, holding tight. "Warren, you have already done so much for me, more than I have any right to ask. I cannot let you walk into a trap because of me." His hand turned in hers, his fingers threading through hers and holding on just as tight. "Katherine, I am not going to let them hang you for something you did not do. Whatever it takes, whatever the risk, I am seeing this through." The firelight caught the determined set of his jaw, the unwavering certainty in his eyes, and something shifted in Catherine's chest. This man had known her for barely a day, but he was willing to risk everything for her, not because he had to, but because he believed it was right. Because he believed in her. When was the last time anyone had done that? "Why do you care so much?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "You could have turned me in and collected the reward and no one would have blamed you. Why did you choose to help me instead?" Warren was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I told you about the man I arrested who turned out to be innocent. What I did not tell you was that his wife came to see me after the real criminal confessed. She was angry, grieving, devastated. She looked me in the eye and told me that good intentions were not enough, that I had an obligation to be sure before I destroyed someone's life. She was right." He looked up, meeting Catherine's gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But it is more than that. When I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Someone honest and brave and scared but refusing to give up. Maybe I am a fool, but I cannot just walk away from that. From you." The air between them felt charged, electric, and Katherine realized she was leaning closer without meaning to, drawn by the warmth in Warren's eyes and the rough tenderness in his voice. She wanted to close the distance, wanted to feel his arms around her, wanted to kiss him and pour everything she was feeling into that connection. But this was too fast, too intense, too dangerous when her whole life hung in the balance. "Warren," she started, but he squeezed her hand gently and pulled back, breaking the moment. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than before. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." Katherine nodded because she did not trust herself to speak, and they separated to their respective sleeping spaces, the cabin suddenly feeling much smaller than it had before. She lay in the bed staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Warren's presence by the fire, and wondered when exactly this had stopped being just about clearing her name and started being about something else entirely. The next day passed in tense preparation. Warren checked and rechecked his weapons, made Katherine go over the escape plan again, and spent hours staring at a rough map he had drawn of the meeting location. Katherine tried to help but mostly felt useless, her anxiety building with every passing hour. By the time the sun started setting, her nerves were so frayed she felt like she might shatter at a loud noise. "I am leaving now," Warren said, strapping on his gun belt and checking that his revolvers were loaded. "Remember what I told you. If I am not back by dawn, you run and you do not look back. Promise me." "I promise," Katherine lied, because they both knew she would not leave him if something went wrong. Warren studied her face like he knew exactly what she was thinking, then shook his head with something that might have been a smile if the situation were not so grim. "You are stubborn, you know that." "I learned from the best," Katherine shot back, and then before she could second-guess herself, she crossed the space between them and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a press of lips, but Warren's sharp intake of breath and the way his hand came up to cup her cheek told her he felt it too, this impossible thing growing between them. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark and his voice was rough. "I will come back," he promised. "Wait for me." Then he was gone, riding off into the gathering dusk, and Katherine was left alone with her fear and her hope and the memory of his lips against hers. She tried to wait inside the cabin, but her anxiety would not let her stay still. So she took the rifle and positioned herself outside where she could watch the trail. Hours passed with agonizing slowness, the moon rising high and bright overhead, and Katherine's hands ached from gripping the rifle so tightly. It was past midnight when she heard the hoofbeats, multiple horses coming fast from the direction of town. Katherine's heart leaped into her throat and she ducked behind a boulder, raising the rifle and praying it was Warren coming back. But as the riders came into view, her blood ran cold. There were 3 of them. Marcus Crowley led the way, his face twisted with rage even at this distance, and behind him rode 2 rough-looking men Katherine recognized as Pike's enforcers from the saloon. They were heading straight for the cabin and they were armed for trouble. Warren was not with them, which meant either they had caught him at the meeting or he had escaped and they were coming here hoping to find Katherine before he could. Either way, she was out of time. Katherine did exactly what Warren had told her not to do. Instead of running for the back trail, she slipped inside the cabin, barred the door, and positioned herself by the window with the rifle. If Marcus and his men wanted her, they were going to have to come through that door, and she was going to make sure they regretted it. Katherine Walsh. Marcus's voice rang out across the clearing. "I know you are in there. Come out now and I might let you live long enough to stand trial." Katherine did not answer, just sighted down the rifle barrel and waited. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart, her breathing even and controlled. She had been running for days, but she was done running now. This ended here, one way or another. "Fine," Marcus snarled. "We will do this the hard way. Boys, burn it down." Katherine watched in horror as one of the men dismounted and pulled out a torch, moving toward the cabin with clear intent. She could not let them burn her alive in here, which meant she had to either surrender or fight. Some choice. She was sighting on the man with the torch, her finger tightening on the trigger, when a 4th horse exploded out of the darkness behind the 3 men. Warren hit them like a thunderbolt, his horse slamming into the man with the torch and sending him sprawling. The torch fell and guttered out in the dirt as Warren's gun cleared leather with practiced speed. "Federal Marshal," Warren's voice cracked like a whip through the night air. "You are all under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy. Put your hands up now." Marcus wheeled his horse around, his hand going for his gun, and Warren fired. The shot took Marcus in the shoulder and he screamed, tumbling from his saddle. Pike's two enforcers were smarter. They saw Warren's drawn guns and the deadly calm in his eyes, and they put their hands up without a fight. Katherine was out the door and running before she could think better of it, the rifle still in her hands but forgotten as she reached Warren's side. He was dismounting, keeping his guns trained on the three men, and when he glanced at her, his expression was equal parts relieved and furious. "I told you to run if there was trouble," he said. "And I told you I was stubborn," Katherine replied, and despite everything, Warren's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Marcus was writhing on the ground, clutching his bloody shoulder and cursing. Warren handed Katherine one of his revolvers, trusting her to keep it trained on Pike's men while he moved to secure Marcus. He hauled the injured man to his feet with no gentleness at all, his voice cold as ice. "Marcus Crowley, you are under arrest for the murder of Benjamin Crowley, the attempted murder of Katherine Walsh, and conspiracy to commit fraud and murder. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "You cannot prove anything," Marcus spat, his face pale with pain. "It is my word against hers, and everyone knows she did it. Actually, I have a witness who says otherwise. Sarah from the saloon. She told me everything tonight. How you came to her 2 days before Benjamin died, drunk and desperate, saying you had to get your hands on the inheritance money before Pike's men killed you. How you asked her to help you frame someone, anyone, just to throw the law off your trail. She refused, but she remembered the conversation and she is willing to testify in court." Marcus's face went from pale to ashen. "She is lying. You cannot trust a word she says." "Maybe, but I also have the bootprint evidence, the insurance policy motive, and the testimony of the gun expert I brought in who agrees that the weapon was not cleaned properly after firing, which is inconsistent with Katherine's known habits." Warren's grip on Marcus tightened. "I have enough to make a case, and with Sarah's testimony about your state of mind before the murder, I think a jury is going to see right through you." Katherine felt like she could breathe for the first time in days, the weight lifting off her chest as Marcus slumped in defeat. It was over. Warren had done it. He had found the proof they needed, and now she was going to get her life back. Warren tied Marcus and the other 2 men securely, then sent Katherine to fetch rope from the cabin to make sure the bonds were extra tight. By the time she returned, Pike's men were singing like canaries, falling over themselves to testify against Marcus in exchange for lighter sentences. They admitted they had helped Marcus plan the murder, had provided him with an alibi, had helped him clean up the crime scene. They named names and gave dates, and laid out the whole conspiracy in exchange for the promise of mercy. "We need to get them back to town," Warren said, as the first light of dawn started painting the eastern sky. "The sheriff is going to have some explaining to do for being so quick to arrest you without investigating properly, but that is a problem for another day. Right now, let's get you cleared." The ride back to Ardmore felt surreal, like Katherine was living in a dream. She rode behind Warren again, her arms around his waist, while Marcus and his accomplices were tied to their saddles and led behind. By the time they reached town, word had spread and people were lining the streets to watch the strange procession. Katherine kept her head high, refusing to show fear or shame, and Warren's solid presence in front of her gave her strength. The sheriff was summoned, and Warren laid out the evidence in a voice that brooked no argument. Marcus confessed under pressure, his shoulder wound and his terror of hanging making him willing to cut a deal. Sarah gave her testimony with shaking hands but a clear voice. The insurance agent produced records. The gun expert provided his analysis. Piece by piece, the case was built, and by noon, Katherine Walsh was officially exonerated and Marcus Crowley was sitting in the cell she had recently vacated. "You are free to go, Miss Walsh," the sheriff said, and he had the grace to look ashamed of how quickly he had arrested her. "The territory extends its apologies for your wrongful imprisonment." "Thank you," Katherine said, because what else could she say? She had been arrested, imprisoned, forced to flee and hide, had nearly been killed, all because this man had been too lazy or too corrupt to do his job properly. But she was free now, and that was what mattered. Warren walked her out of the sheriff's office into the bright October sunshine, and Katherine had to stop and just breathe, taking in the fact that she could walk down this street now without fear of being arrested. She could go back to her life. Could start over for real this time. Except when she thought about starting over, all she could think about was the man standing beside her, quiet and steady and watching her with eyes that held questions he was not asking. "What will you do now?" Warren asked finally. "The ranch will probably go to one of Benjamin's cousins back east. I do not know if there will be a job for you there anymore." "I suppose I will have to find new employment," Katherine said slowly, her mind already turning to the practicalities, "and a new place to live." "I was staying in a room at the ranch. You could come with me," Warren said, and the words hung in the air between them like a promise. "I am a marshal. I travel a lot, but I have that cabin and I have been thinking about settling down more, building something permanent instead of just drifting. I could use someone with a head for books and numbers to help me manage things." Katherine's heart was pounding because she knew he was not just offering her a job. "Warren, we have known each other for 3 days. That is not enough time to make that kind of decision, isn't it?" Warren turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. "Katherine, I know it is fast. I know it is probably crazy, but when I look at you, I see my future. I see someone I want to build that permanent life with, someone I want to come home to, and I think maybe you feel something similar." Katherine wanted to argue, wanted to be practical and sensible, and point out all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But standing there in the sunshine with Warren looking at her like she was something precious, all she could think about was how safe she had felt in his arms, how much faith he had shown in her, how the thought of him riding away and leaving her behind made her chest ache. "I feel it," she admitted and watched his expression transform with hope. "I do not know if it is love yet, but it could be. It feels like it could be." "Then give it a chance," Warren said, reaching out to take her hands in his. "Give us a chance. Come with me. We will take it slow if you want. Court properly, do things right. But do not walk away from this. From us." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast of his sun-bronzed skin against her paler fingers, and made her decision. She had been running for so long, first from St. Louis and then from the false charges here. She was tired of running, tired of being alone. And this man, this good, honorable, infuriating man had shown her what it meant to be believed in, to be fought for, to be protected not because she was helpless but because she mattered. "All right," Katherine said, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. "Yes, I will come with you. I will give us a chance." Warren's smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, bright and warm and utterly transforming. He pulled her into his arms right there on the street, holding her close while people walked by and probably stared, and Katherine did not care because she was where she wanted to be. "Thank you," Warren murmured against her hair. "I promise I will make you happy. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your trust." "You already are," Katherine told him, pulling back just enough to look up into his face. "You saved my life, Warren. You gave me back my future. I could not ask for anything more." "Well, you are going to get it anyway," Warren said. And then he kissed her properly, deep and slow and full of promise, and Katherine kissed him back with everything she had. They stayed in Ardmore for another week while the legal matters were sorted out, and Katherine retrieved her belongings from the ranch. Benjamin's cousin arrived from Pennsylvania to take over the property, and when he heard what had happened, he gave Katherine a month's wages and a glowing reference letter. Sarah from the saloon left Pike's employment and found work at the hotel as a maid, free from her debts thanks to testimony protection. Marcus Crowley was tried, convicted, and sentenced to hang for murder, his execution set for early December. Warren and Katherine spent those days getting to know each other properly, talking late into the night about their pasts and their dreams for the future. Katherine learned that Warren had been orphaned young and raised by his older brother, had become a marshal because he believed in justice, had never found anyone he wanted to settle down with until now. Warren learned that Katherine loved books and music, that she had taught herself bookkeeping from her father's ledgers, that she had always wanted to see the mountains but had never had the chance. "We will go," Warren promised one evening as they sat on the porch of the cabin watching the sun set. "After we get married, we will take a trip up to Colorado and you can see the Rockies." Katherine's heart fluttered at the casual way he said married, like it was a foregone conclusion. "Is that a proposal, Marshal Fletcher?" Warren grinned and pulled something from his pocket. A ring, simple silver with a small stone that caught the fading light. "I was getting to that. Katherine Walsh, I know this is fast and I know we still have a lot to learn about each other, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Katherine looked at the ring, at Warren's hopeful face, at the landscape spread out before them all painted in gold and crimson, and felt joy bubble up in her chest like champagne. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Warren slipped the ring onto her finger and then kissed her breathless, and Katherine thought that maybe getting falsely accused of murder was the best thing that had ever happened to her, because it had brought her here, to this moment, to this man. They were married in early November by a circuit preacher who happened through town, with Sarah and Warren's friend from the fort serving as witnesses. Katherine wore a simple cream-colored dress that Sarah helped her sew, and Warren wore his best suit with his marshal's star pinned over his heart. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with absolute certainty, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Katherine felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The winter that followed was the happiest of Katherine's life. She and Warren settled into the cabin, making it a home together. Katherine managed Warren's finances and helped him with paperwork, while Warren took on marshal work that kept him closer to home. They talked and laughed and learned each other's habits, the rhythms of their days falling into comfortable patterns. And at night, they lay together in the bed they now shared, Warren's arms around her and Katherine's head on his chest, and planned the life they were building together. "I want children," Warren told her one night as snow fell softly outside their window. "2 or 3 at least. Is that something you want?" "Yes," Katherine said, her hand splaying over his chest where she could feel his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. "I want to build a family with you. I want to fill this cabin with love and noise and chaos." Warren's arms tightened around her. "Then that is what we will do." Spring came, and with it, news that Katherine was pregnant. Warren was overjoyed, already planning additions to the cabin, and building a cradle with his own hands. Katherine watched him work and felt so full of love she thought she might overflow with it. This was everything she had never known she wanted. this life they were building together out of faith and determination and love. Their son was born in late autumn of 1883, a healthy baby boy with Warren's blue eyes and Katherine's dark hair. They named him Benjamin, after the man whose death had brought them together, and Warren held his son with tears streaming down his face while Katherine watched and felt her heart expand to hold even more love than she thought possible. "We did it," Warren whispered, his eyes meeting Katherine's over their baby's head. "We made a family." "We did," Katherine agreed and reached out to pull both of her boys close. "And it is just the beginning." The years that followed were full and rich and beautiful. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose in 1885 and another son named Thomas in 1887. Warren continued his marshal work, but scaled back significantly, taking only cases that kept him close to home. Katherine started a small bookkeeping business helping local ranchers and merchants manage their finances, and she was surprised to discover she had a talent for it that people valued. The cabin grew along with their family, Warren adding rooms and a proper barn and eventually a small stable. Katherine planted a garden and fruit trees, and in the summer evenings they would sit on the porch together watching their children play in the yard, marveling at the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy. "You ever think about that day in the alley?" Warren asked one evening when the children were in bed and they had the porch to themselves. "About how differently things could have gone, all the time," Katherine admitted, leaning into his side. "If you had arrested me instead of believing me, I would have hanged. I owe you everything, Warren." "No," Warren said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We owe each other. You gave me something to fight for, a reason to stay in one place and build something lasting. Before I met you, I was just drifting. Now I have a home, I have a purpose, I have you." Katherine turned in his arms to kiss him properly, pouring 17 years of love and gratitude into that connection. When they finally pulled apart, Warren was smiling in that soft way he reserved just for her, and Katherine's heart was full to bursting. "I love you," she told him, because after all these years she never tired of saying it. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Warren replied, pulling her close again. "My brave, stubborn, wonderful wife, my Katherine." They sat together on the porch as the stars came out overhead, wrapped in each other's arms and surrounded by the evidence of their love. And Katherine thought that maybe innocence and guilt did not matter as much as what you chose to build in the aftermath. She had been falsely accused, had nearly lost everything, but from that darkness had come the greatest light of her life. She had found love in the last place she expected it, had found home in a hidden cabin in the Oklahoma hills, had found family with a man who believed in her when no one else would. And now, watching the moon rise over the land they had made their own, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. Because every hardship, every moment of fear and pain had led her to Warren, had led her to this life, this family, this love. And that made it all worthwhile. Their story was not one of tragedy and injustice, though it had started that way. It was a story of faith rewarded, of love found in unexpected places, of 2 people who had chosen to believe in each other against all odds. It was a story of home built from nothing but determination and hope. And it was a story that would continue for decades more, through grandchildren and gray hair and quiet evenings spent side by side, until the very end. But on that particular autumn evening in 1899, with their children safe in bed and their land peaceful around them, Warren and Katherine simply held each other close and were grateful. Grateful for the chance encounter in an alley, for the faith that had saved her life, for the love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. "Thank you," Katherine whispered one more time, and Warren held her tighter, understanding perfectly what she meant. Thank you for believing. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for loving me when I had nothing to offer but my word and my trust. Thank you for giving me everything. They sat together under the stars, two hearts beating as one, and knew that whatever the future brought, they would face it together, just as they always had. Just as they always would. And that was the greatest gift of all.